Nonverbal communication, the messages of action, space, time, and silence. Now that we looked into the importance and function of language in intercultural communication, let us examine nonverbal communication. Even though we need to pay attention to the signals we emit and our nonverbal communication in any setting, especially in a professional setting, it is particularly important when dealing with other cultures. Although many nonverbal actions are shaped by culture, there are some that are specific to each culture. Many misunderstandings can arise from misinterpreting nonverbal communication. For example, in Mexico, it is not unusual to see both men and women hugging each other in public. Yet in cultures such as China and Japan, these open displays of physical contact are normally excluded from interpersonal exchanges. Moving one's head from side to side in the United States is usually a sign of no and means disagreement. Yet in India, the same sign often represents agreement. In Western cultures, people normally greet by shaking hands. Arab men often greet by kissing on both cheeks. In Japan, men greet by exchanging bows. In Thailand, to signal another person to come near, one moves the fingers back and forth with the palm down. In the United States, you beckon someone to come by holding the palm up and moving the fingers towards your body. In Vietnam, that same motion is reserved for someone attempting to summon his or her dog. In the United States, an employee may put his or her legs up on the desk as a sign of relaxation. In several other cultures, this is a sign of belittling someone in front of you. Whether intentionally or unintentionally, we send nonverbal messages all the time. Nonverbal communication is defined as involving all those nonverbal stimuli in a communication setting that are generated by both the source and his or her use of the environment, and that have potential message value for the source or receiver. In addition to the previous body messages, there is also body movement such as your posture, the gestures you make, etc. Fingers crossed or pointing directly at someone when speaking to them, or making thumbs up or thumbs down. Facial expressions and eye contact and gaze are extremely important as well. For example, in the U.S., on the TV show Judge Judy, the judge often tells a defendant to look me straight in the eye instead of looking all over the place. She explains that this is an indication of honesty if they do. Or in an interview, we are always told to look at the interviewer straight in the eye for the same reason. In some cultures, looking someone straight in the eye could be considered disrespectful. Looking elsewhere is a sign of modesty, humility, and respect. Senses of touch and smell are equally important. High frequency of touching is required in some cultures, whereas in others it is more like a hands-off approach. Gender is also a factor here in touching. When President of Egypt Sadat and his wife were visiting the United States, hosted by U.S. President Jimmy Carter, the latter immediately hugged and kissed the former's wife, and Sadat also hugged and kissed Carter's wife. This caused a major cultural backlash in Egypt, where people were offended that Sadat pretended to be okay with the kissing of his wife, which should have been taboo. When it comes to scent, think about The Scent of a Woman, even in the movie by that name if you haven't watched it. The movie is about a blind man, played by Al Pacino, who gets to know people by their scent. He teaches his caretaker, a young man with little experience, how to identify sensuality. How important was scent in determining gender and sensuality? Think about incense in China, or the herbs used in Chinese and Arabian cultures. In Bali, when lovers greet one another, they often breathe deeply in a kind of friendly sniffing. Paralanguage is another variation. What about space and distance? Personal space is very important to U.S. and European cultures, but is almost non-existent in many cultures. Or think about personal space between lovers as opposed to between other family members. Seating arrangements, time, and even silence are cues that you need to focus on.